And this is the agenda. First, I will give you a short introduction to ExFlow Dimension Owners, and then we will do the walkthrough in Business Central, followed by a summary and then the Q&A. So, what is Dimension Owners? Well, you could say that it's like another way of building an approval framework. It is especially useful if your approval flows are based on combinations of several dimensions. So for example, let's say that you have 200 stores and 40 regions, and there should be one responsible person per store and one per region who approves. That means that you can have like more than 1,000 approval rules if you would have to create one from each combination. So with ExFlow Dimension Owners, you can instead solve this by setting up a single approval rule that will handle all these combinations in a dynamic way, since that approval group that you will create does not have a static member. So instead, it's dynamically like fetching the approvers from the dimension owners that you're creating as well. It will make a little bit more sense when I show you this, but that's simply how it works. So today I will show you the basic settings on how to set it up so you get an idea of how you can build your flows and then how it could look like in the import journal, for example. So let's do the walkthrough in Business Central. So let's say that you have an approval flow that's built on regions or stores and that you have a large number of combination of approval flows. Then you would need to create a rule for each combination, for example, specifying the exact store, the exact region, and so on for those combination in a regular framework. But instead of doing that hundreds of times, you can simply focus on who the store owner is for each store and who is responsible for each region. And then you set that up through ExFlow Dimension Owners. So my dimension owners that I'm using today are based on areas such as Northern Europe or North America and so on. And each area have a code, which is 30 or 40, 50, and so on. So there are a few steps that we will go through that you need to do to activate this. 4 steps to be precise. So let's start with the first step, and that is to set up the dimension owners. So then you search for ExFlow Dimension Owners. And here you set up all your dimension owners, for example, then the store manager. And then if, let's say that you have a store and the store manager leaves, then you can add the new store manager to that area. So it's much easier for you to handle and administer all your areas by just changing the owner of that store, for example. Now I have already created my dimension owners here. You can see them. But let's look at how it would look like if you would create them from scratch. So then you would create new, or sorry, click on new. And here you would choose which dimension that you want to use. So I have area, but let's, for example, then use customer group here for an example now. So you click that in, and then you choose the value. So I want to use large. And then you select an approval group, and that is the owner for that department then. So I want to add, let's say, Anders here. And here you can work with amounts as well if you would want to. So that's what you have to fill out. Once you have created a dimension owner by filling this out, you can copy all the values from that dimension owner to create a new one. So perhaps you want to create one dimension owner per area, or in this case, per customer group. Then the only thing you need to do is to change the owner of that group. So you copy it and then you change the owner of that group. So you can see here, you have copy dimension owners. If you click here, then you choose that you want to create for all values in this group. So if I click yes here or okay here and yes, and then we go back, you can see I now created one for each dimension in that customer group. The only thing is here that now each of these have the same, you can see Anders, and then you see Anders, so it's the same approver on each. So the only thing you have to change is the owner of that dimension then. So that's how you set up all your dimension owners. This is the part that takes a little bit more time, but after this, it's very simple. And then when you work with it, it's very simple. So let's move on to the next step, which is to create an approval group. So let's go to ExFlow approval groups. And now I have, remember, I'm working with areas now, so I have already created one here named area. So you name the code, what you want it to be, and then the name of the group. And I wrote dimension owner area here for it, so I know that it's that. After this, you have to fill out the dynamic approval type, which is dimension owner, and then the dimension code. In this case, it's area. And that's the only thing you need to do here. Only settings. You can do other settings as well, but these are the basics, and we will only go through the basics today. So the next step is to create an approval rule. So let's go to ExFlow approval rules. And then you can see here, I have created one as well for area. So when you fill out your approval rule, you do a code and a name, so you know what it's about. And then you need to fill out the dimension code. So you put in the area here. It's my dimension code, my dimension owners that I work with. It's area. And then you fill out the approval groups that should apply to this. You can also set it up with amounts. So in this case, I have added that the area should be the first approver, then warehouse, and then the CFO if the amount is over 50,000. So that's the approval flow that I have for my dimension owners here. You can later on when you work with this, interpret references on your documents to trigger what area that should be used in the import journal, for example. But you can also manually trigger what dimension owner that you should be using. So you can work with it in a more automatic way or manually if you would want to. And the last setting that you need to set up, it's under ExFlow setup. And then you go down to approval, and then you have always propose new approvers. So when you have this set up and clicked in, if an approver online would, for example, change from one area to another, then ExFlow will change the approval flow and the approvers based on that area. So you don't need to do this manually in ExFlow in Business Central. It happens automatically when you have ticked this one. And you can control what your users can change or not on the web when they approve by using coding rules and denying coding rules. So you could say that they can only choose between area 30 and 40, for example, and so on. So you can control that as well. So that's it. That's the setup of it. If we go to the import journal to see how it could look like in practice then. So I have two invoices here. Let's look at the first one here. It's on 1,250. You can see here on the imported lines that I have area code 40. If we open, and you can also see the apply approval rule, because remember I created an approval rule, which is this one. So area code 40. And then that triggers Cecilia and warehouse. Let's say that we would have another area code here, then that would trigger Bertil and warehouse. So depending on the dimension owner, the area, then it's a different approval flow. On the second invoice here, I have 80,000. We have area 40, but now you can also see that the CFO is added here. And in the approval rule, I added that the CFO should approve invoices over 50,000, for example. So that's why it's added. So let's have a look at the approval rule one more time. You can see here, first it's dimension owner, and it was chosen based on which area, and then warehouse and CFO if it's over 50,000. And you can, in the import journal and in approval status, you can see your current dimension owners. So you tick on this one. And then you can see, okay, it's the area 40. And if you want to see who's the owner of this one, you tick on that. And then you have, okay, it's Cecilia, that's the owner of area 40. So these were the basics. So those were the basics. Then you can add other features as well, as we have mentioned earlier in Infosessions that we had this fall and this spring to automate this even more. For example, then you can use ExFlow reference code to trigger which dimension owner that you should have on the document and so on. So that's all in Business Central. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. So that might have been a lot of information. So I have created a summary for you guys, the setup of ExFlow Dimension Owners, the 4 steps that you need to take to set up the dimension owners. So first, you set up the dimension owners. You search for ExFlow Dimension Owners. That's where you do that. And use the copy dimension owners to reduce your manual work. So don't set everything up manually. Use that to have less manual work. After you have created your dimension owners, you create an approval group. So you search for ExFlow approval groups. After that, you create an approval rule. Search for ExFlow approval rules. And then lastly, you activate the always propose new approvers, and you do that under ExFlow setup and then approval.